Hello everyone, I'm Al Grego, and this is the Yes We Are Open podcast. Today I'm back in Regina's warehouse district on Dudney Avenue, just a couple of blocks away from Basket Cases, our story from episode 2. Dudney Avenue is the southernmost border of the warehouse district. On the opposite side of this wide avenue are the former CP rail yards, now referred to as just the yards. The yards are a large 26-hectare piece of unused land separating the warehouse district from downtown Regina. Currently, both Dudney and the yards are in a state of transformation. Back in 2020, an ambitious plan was approved to transform this area into a, quote, vibrant, unique, and connected neighborhood that supports the ongoing revitalization of Regina's city center. The plan includes a pedestrian-friendly mixture of residential, commercial, and recreational spaces connecting the warehouse district to downtown. This revitalization is expected to take up to a decade to complete. In the long term, this is great news for residents and businesses in the area. But in the short term, especially for businesses located along Dudney Avenue, this means construction, limited access, and disruption. If they can hold on until the end, they'll have a prime location and view of Regina's newest attraction. I parked my car in makeshift parking along the yard's construction zone, and I crossed Dudney Avenue to one of those businesses, and the subject of this week's story, Bushwakker Brewpub. When I first arrive at Bushwakker, the first thing that hits me are the big double wooden doors on iron hinges at the entrance with the Bushwakker name carved into them. It immediately sets a mood and time frame. Then, through the doors, up a few steps into a very large dining area. The bar is in the back right corner. It's a warm, inviting place, not filled with too many distractions like TV screens or loud music. It's a late Wednesday afternoon before dinner, so the place is relatively quiet. There are a few locals having a pint, and a couple of tables sat down for either a late lunch or early dinner.
We don't even have to talk. I'm just going to give you this. No. You got everything you need. What fun is that, though? How you doing? I'm well. How are you doing? Good. I'm out. Yeah. That's
Grant, the manager at Bushwakkers.
Cool. Is there an office or somewhere?
He leads me into another empty dining area, separated by a door, and we settle in for our interview.
Hello, my name is Grant Frew, and I'm the bar and marketing manager at the Bushwakker Brewing Company in Regina, Saskatchewan.
Now, when did Bushwakker first start?
Bushwakker opened its doors on January 25th, 1991, and the brewery would have started operating in the summer prior to that. Bushwakker was founded by Bev and Elaine Robertson. Bev was a professor at the University of Regina, physics professor, and when he was on his sabbatical in Stuttgart in 1976, 1977, in Bavaria, he got exposed to some really good German beer. And after the sabbatical was over and he came back to Canada, he didn't really like what the breweries were offering at that time, so he taught himself how to brew beer. And he was using kit beers like most amateur home brewers do, but he didn't like the fact that he didn't have much control over the product, so he switched to full mash home brewing. So he was grinding his own grain and formulating his own recipes, and his beer was pretty good. And some of his colleagues at the University of Regina started joining Bev in their home brewing efforts, and they had a tradition where they would brew beer on the weekend. And they would also go cross-country skiing around the campus at the University of Regina, and then they would order pizza. And they felt that they were making some pretty good beer, and they felt we should call ourselves the Bushwakker Brewers, because bushwhacking is where you're breaking fresh trails through the brush on cross-country skis. So that's how Bushwakker got its name. And then Bev entered his Palliser Porter in the 1986 Great Canadian Amateur Homebrewing Competition. And not only did he win gold for his porter in the dark beer category, but he actually won best of show. So his beer was the very best beer, and all of Canada back then. And that gave him the confidence to take his home brewing out of the basement and bring it to the commercial level. The craft beer scene in the early 90s in Saskatchewan was just like the landscape. It was barren. We were the first full mash brew pub to open up. There were 2 other brew pubs operating at the time, but they were malt extract. And there wasn't any microbreweries at all. But the first microbrewery to open up was in Saskatoon. That was the Pataquid microbrewery, which is still operating today. And it was actually in 2014. That's when we saw the rise of the microbreweries in Saskatchewan. We had Nokomis from Rebellion and Blackbridge, and shortly after that we had Pile of Bones. So these were guys that a lot of them were affiliated with the Ales Homebrewing Club, which actually meets here at the Bushwakker. So these were homebrewers that came here for the monthly meetings, and they got to try our beer, and they were learning more about making quality beer. And then they decided to go and open up their own establishments, but they went the microbrewery route rather than the brew pub route, because they're smart. If you open up a brew pub, you're dealing with the emotional creativities of a head brewer as well as a chef. But a microbrewery, you're just dealing with the brewers. I'm kidding, of course. It's just a different business model. Sure. So
when you first opened, how were you received by the city?
People were confused. Our customers were confused because we had interesting styles of beer they never had before. Like I think of our original 6. Granny's Bitter was one of them. So an English style bitter, beautiful beer, beautiful hop, beautiful balance. But people have never had a hoppy English style beer like that before. So it took a while. And the Palliser Porter too, that's the beer that launched the Bushwakker, but that's a dark, coffee, roasty. People hadn't had anything like that before. But once they understood it and we explained it to them and why it is the way it is and what makes it unique and special, they were hooked and they couldn't get anything like it anywhere else. So that's what started the legion of Bushwakker fans that we have today. The food that we're serving, I guess you could call it bistro style comfort food, for lack of a better term. It's interesting, here in landlocked Saskatchewan, our number 1 selling dish is our Alaskan cod fish and chips. Yeah, by far and away, that's the number 1 selling dish. And another one that's really popular is our award-winning nachos. They're massive and great for sharing. And then in terms of the beer, our number 1 selling beer is a Dungarvan Irish Red Ale. And I think the reason why it's so popular is that it's so food friendly. It works with anything. But it's a really tasty standalone pint. It's so beautifully balanced. And the funny thing about that beer is that when it first came out, I was actually working in the brewery. Boy, how many years ago was that? 24 years ago, I was working in the brewery. And then our then head brewer had just got married. And he said to me, Grant, I'm going to make this beer to commemorate my new marriage. And I'm going to call it Honeymoon Ale. And I thought, well, that's a funny name. But it had honey malt in it. And it was a very nice balanced beer. But it bombed. We made about 3 tanks of it, and then we discontinued it because nobody wanted to order it. And then when our next brewer came along, that was David Rudge, who has the Half Pints Brewery in Winnipeg. He found the recipe, and he said, this is a great recipe. This is a really good example of an Irish red ale.
So he could tell just from looking at the recipe?
He could tell by looking at the recipe, the malts, the type of hops, the amounts. And so we just brought it back, and we called it Dungarvan Irish Red Ale. And it's the number 1 selling beer, and all we did was change the name. That is the power of marketing. Yeah, it's so funny. I think that the craft beer culture has certainly grown. Back in 91, people were drinking, I don't want to name any brands, but
we know the ones.
They were drinking the industrial beers. Yeah. There was a little bit of imports like Guinness and that sort of thing, but the English bitters, the Vienna lagers, the European style pilsners, like the imperial stouts, the barley wines, mead. Yeah. We have our famous blackberry mead. None of that had been available before. But now other breweries have come along, and with the microbreweries, their beer is all over the province. Yeah. So you can get it anywhere. So people are used to seeing new things, trying new things. They expect creativity, they expect quality, they expect a competitive price, originality, and I think they're getting it. And the nice thing too is that we get together the brewery operators a couple of times a year, and it's a really nice experience when you're sitting across the table from someone who's your competitor, yet you don't really view them that way because we're all trying to do the same thing, just make a living, make good beer. We're not trying to cut each other's throats, finding our own path, carving your own piece of the pie. So it's a nice sense of camaraderie. It's a good business.
I'm guessing you do wholesale as well. You don't just have your beer here.
No, we don't wholesale much. We did a little bit of it when the government liquor stores were operating. We would take a little bit of beer to the liquor stores. But when the micros came, they had the distribution and the salesmen and all that kind of stuff. We weren't really set up to do that. Plus, our beer is packaged in 2-liter plastic jugs and 650 milliliter glass bomber bottles. We do not can. We don't have a canning line. We don't have any of that automation. Our assistant brewer actually fills and cleans the bottles by hand, one at a time.
Wow.
Puts the labels on by hand, one at a time. So we have the cooler at the end of the bar where people can buy our beer to take home, but we're not set up for distribution through wholesale. And that's, by definition, a brew pub is a restaurant with its own in-house brewery.
Yes.
So most of the beer is consumed in the restaurant.
So if anybody wants to try a Bushwakker beer, they have to actually come to Regina.
They do.
Interesting.
Sorry.
No.
That's the model.
What would you say has been the heyday so far? Or are we in it now for Bushwakker?
No, we're not in the heyday.
No.
The heyday was probably, I would say, 2010. And I mentioned earlier about our blackberry mead. So blackberry mead is not beer. We use 400 pounds of honey that we get from the Lumsden Valley, which is just northwest of Regina. And we simply add water and a special mead yeast that can actually deal with honey rather than malted barley. And then we'll add 84 pounds of pureed blackberries to it. And it takes about a year before it's ready to go. And when we first released it, nobody knew what it was. Nobody cared what it was. Nobody wanted it. We used to sell it in little 12-ounce bottles for $2. And I was bartending back then, so the way I would sell it is it's a great stocking stuffer. It's cheap. It's high in alcohol. Oh, sure, I'll try it. And then I think it was in 2007, CTV News came in and did a story on blackberry mead, and they were talking about the history of Bushwakker, and it was our Christmas specialty. And J.C. Garden was the journalist who did the story, and his story was so good that the national network picked it up. So all across Canada, everyone was seeing this blackberry mead story at the Bushwakker Brewpub. And we were getting phone calls from New York City to Victoria, everybody asking, how do I get this blackberry mead? And by then it was all gone. And I had to tell them it's all sold out. And they said, why are you advertising it? And I said, it's not an ad, it's a news story.
Yeah.
But after that, then people, every year when we would release it, they would be here like the day before and they would camp out.
Yeah.
And we would have a lineup like all the way down the block, like hundreds of people. And we would sell thousands and thousands of bottles of mead, and that was the heyday. As a brew pub, especially a family-owned and operated independent brew pub, we really focus on the quality of the food and the service and the beer, but it's what's consumed here. We put on a lot of events, a lot of music, a lot of cultural events, rider games before and after. It's a sea of green. So we really take pride in just being an independent family-owned and operated public gathering place.
Up next, Bushwakker's Brewpub has been a staple in Regina's warehouse district for the past 34 years. They made national news on multiple occasions with their award-winning Palliser Porter and Blackberry Mead. But that won't be the last time Bushwakkers makes the news. The next time will come with plenty of controversy and accusations. What happened? Stay tuned to find out. You're listening to Yes, We Are Open. In 1990, Bev and Elaine Robertson introduced Regina, Saskatchewan to the craft beer scene. They opened Bushwakker Brewpub, named one of Canada's top 5 brew pubs by the Globe and Mail, and quickly became an anchor tenant in Regina's warehouse district. Both Bev and Elaine have passed, but Bushwakker remains a testament to their dedication to brewing fine beer and to the city of Regina. The past few years haven't been too kind to the restaurant industry, and Bushwakker wasn't immune. So what was their biggest challenge? Let's find out.
If I were to ask you, think of a time where, the business struggled and maybe even came close to shutting its doors, what would that be?
The darkest day that I can think of was, it's funny, this time of year, I have mixed emotions because it was around St. Patrick's Day in 2020. That's when the pandemic was coming. Yeah. And there were restaurants in Regina that were posting on their social media, were voluntarily closing. And St. Patrick's Day is one of the biggest days of the year. And we had a band book, and we had the Irish dancers booked, and we had a special beer, and we had a special menu. And we had to basically turn the party into a St. Patrick's Day dinner where the tables were all spread apart, and there weren't a lot of people in here, but I remember walking around and talking to everybody and wearing a mask, and is everybody feeling comfortable, and they were feeling okay. But it was just St. Patrick's Day at Bushwakker, as everyone's dancing and jumping around, and it was so subdued. And then a couple of days later, that's when we closed down. And I remember it was a Friday, and I came in, and it was dark in here, and there was nobody here, and the chairs were all flipped up on the tables, and it was like happy hour on a Friday, where normally it's just pumping with energy, people talking and laughing and eating. And it was so deadly quiet. There weren't even any of the rumblings of the vehicles going outside. And I just felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. Because at that point, we'd been open for almost 30 years. This is my second family. This is everything. Yeah. And just have nobody here. It was just like an empty shell. Walking through the kitchen and it being dark. It was absolutely terrifying. And as my job as bar and marketing manager, what am I going to do? What am I going to market? What am I going to tell people about? Like we also have our weekly newsletter, and I had to write a very moving passage about how we're just going to go underground for a while until this blew over. And I thought it was pretty to the point and emotional. And I had one of my supervisors read it, and she started crying. And it's like, okay, I hit the emotional point I was looking for. And then coming in with the chef a couple days later, and we've got all these produce, it's going to spoil. Like, we've got to process it, we've got to freeze it, whatever we can't save. We went to the food bank, and then going from 55 employees down to 4, of which I was one, that was just crazy. My friend Sean from 9 Mile Legacy Brewing in Saskatchewan called and said, I hope you're going to keep the newsletter going. And I said, Sean, what am I going to talk about? And he said, just share some stories. Like, people are going to be needing stories right now. Yeah. And I'll never forget that. The restrictions are being lifted, and we're being allowed to open, have more people. But the problem was, when the pandemic happened, all of our kitchen staff went and got jobs in construction. Yeah. So we didn't have the staff. And then the war happened in Ukraine. That was awful. It still is awful. It's not over yet. Hopefully we're getting close. But it was the Ukrainian refugees that came that actually saved us. Because they came and they needed jobs, and some of them had cooking experience, and they had a bit of English, and we brought them in. And at one point we had five, six working in the kitchen, and we had some working out in the front. We still have a number of Ukrainians working here, bartenders, kitchen staff, and they're great. They saved us. This was uncharted territory, and nobody knew what was going on. So we just did the best that we could, and we listened to our customers, and we asked them, what do you want? How are you feeling? What can we do to make you feel safe? And then something extremely controversial happened. As the restrictions were being lifted, when the province of Saskatchewan said, we're going to open things up again. Some of our older clients and long-term customers said, you're not going to see us for a while because we don't know what's going to happen. We're going to stay away. And we couldn't have that. They're our bread and butter. So what we decided to do, and this was coming from a very good place. So we're in our Arizona room. This is our private banquet room. So what we decided to do was, okay, anybody that comes into this room will have to prove that they've been vaccinated. And then in the great big main area, that's where people that don't care about that kind of thing, they can all mix together. So we just wanted our older clientele, and maybe they were compromised in some sort of way or had a family member, they would come in here and they could feel safe. And I was even dealing with some of the senior medical officers about how to do this correctly. And they told me how to word it, and we can't guarantee immunity and all that kind of stuff. So all I did was I made a little sign and I put it in the front of this entranceway to this room, talking about, why we're doing it. And holy smokes, did that ever blow up, positively and negatively.
I was about to ask, in what way?
It was positive and it was negative.
Yeah.
And it was mostly positive, but some of the negative was just vicious. Vicious. Like people hoping that the building burned down and we would go out of business, and they were accusing us of segregation and being racist and discriminatory. And it was such a brutal attack. It went on the newswire, so that meant that Bushwakker was all over Canada. Yeah. Every little newspaper, every radio station. But I think people would just maybe read the headline or something and then jump to conclusions. It was awful. But the people that supported it, it was funny because once we opened up this room, it was packed in here all the time. Well, they obviously saw what we were trying to do. Yeah. Offer choice. Yeah. We weren't telling anybody, you have to go in this room, or you have to go in that room. You have a choice. Yeah. It's just, if you're going to come into this room, just prove that you're vaccinated. Yeah. That's all we're trying to do. So that was dark, but we got through that. But we're still dealing with some of the long-term effects of COVID, and those are the behavioral changes. So one of the things that I kind of laugh at is it's ironic that with our live music, we have free live music every Monday, every Wednesday. Monday is live jazz and blues, and Wednesday is folk music. So now we have moved up the performance times because people don't stay out as late as they used to. So now the shows start at 7:30 and they're done at 9 o'clock. So in the summertime, it is so funny when you see the band saying, okay, everybody, thank you very much. Have a great night. And it is broad daylight outside. But it works because people that are here for supper, they're willing to stay and maybe have another beer and check out the band. The band is playing less. They're making more money. They get to go home earlier. So it's a win, but it's just weird.
Given what's happening right now with tariff threats, and there's a whole buy Canadian movement, which I think most people would say is positive, how is that affecting you guys, if any? Given that one of your best sellers is an American product, right? Alaskan cod.
Yeah. The tariffs on aluminum, I'm not too concerned about because we're using big glass bomber bottles and 2-liter plastic jugs.
Yeah.
And the bottle caps that we get, they might have some aluminum in them, but we get them from Canada. Not too concerned about that. But no, I hear our chef talking about concerns about citrus, meat, all of those prices going up. So yeah, that's more pressure. But I guess the saving grace is that all the restaurants are going to be affected the same. It's a level playing field. But yeah, it's just another challenge on top of challenge after challenge. It's a good thing we like doing this so much, though.
Yeah.
It's a labor of love.
Coming up after the break, we find out what the future holds for Bushwakker Brewpub. Welcome back to Yes, We Are Open. Bushwakker Brewpub's management team has been able to overcome some pretty heady challenges in the past few years, and they still need to weather the storm of the revitalization of the yards in Dudney Avenue. So what does the future look like for Bushwakker? Let's find out.
We're talking about the future outlook, your vision for what you would like to see in the future, whether it's expansion or whether it's wholesaling your beer. Or
no way.
I understand, but I'm giving you examples of what I've heard others say.
Okay, I don't think we want to expand, and I don't think we want to get into wholesaling. When people come in here, they'll say, I haven't been here in a decade and nothing has changed. But they're not saying that in a negative way. They're saying that in a comforting way. So they're coming back to Regina for whatever reason, if they're here for a visit or a job, something like that. And they come in and it's like, oh yeah, this is how I remember it. They say, this feels like home. We hear that time and time again. I feel extremely proud. I think the restaurant has a good reputation. We're known by many as being the Saskatchewan craft beer pioneer. Working with a family-owned and operated business, you get extreme loyalty, but it's that passion that really drives us. I'm happy with the steps forward that we've made, but we're very traditional, right? We do a lot of things the same way. So that might hinder us a little bit and that we're a little stubborn, I guess you might say. But, we've also been here for 34 years and we're doing well. We'll just keep doing what we're doing as long as we can. And again, we do have a huge legion of Bushwakker fans that we are so thankful for. We consider them to be extended family. I'm really looking forward to phase 2 of the Dooney Avenue revitalization project being done, because I think when it's completed, it's going to be beautiful and it's just going to serve as a catalyst for the rejuvenation of this area and connecting downtown with the historic warehouse district. It's going to be something to see. One of my most vivid memories, again, this was after the pandemic, we put on a big show with the Regina Jazz Society in June. And we had a really great band playing. And I remember on the set break, seeing the musicians going out and just talking to the people and shaking hands and hugging, because it was almost like a reunion, right? The pub was packed and just that feeling of camaraderie and connection. And I was thinking, this is what it's all about. There's the music and people are happy and there's good food and there's good drinks and people are connecting. This is what it means to be a human living in Canada, like that pub culture. It's such a digital, crazy world out there. And when you come here, we have one TV and it's never turned on. And the music is down low because we want people to get off their devices and share stories and share a laugh or share a sad story, open up to someone, whatever. But just connect as human beings in a warm, welcoming environment with good food and good beer. And when we can provide that experience to other people, that's a good job. That's making a good contribution to society.
Is Bushwakker Brewpub open?
Yes, we are open.
Perfect. That's all we need. That's the story of Bushwakker Brewpub. Building a community around your business has many advantages. First, the members of that community become your most loyal customers. But second, and perhaps more importantly, they also serve as your best marketers. After all, most effective advertising is word of mouth. A business like Bushwakker couldn't have survived the past 5 years without the strong community they built around their business. Not just their patrons, but the craft beer community as well, which they had a big hand in creating. This goes to show that community doesn't always have to be B2C or business to customer. It can also be B2B, business to business. Building a B2C community is obviously the biggest challenge. It's essentially building your customer base. But the good news is, unless you're blazing a trail like Bushwackers did in Regina, a B2B community for your business likely already exists. You just have to seek it out and find a way to become part of it. It could be an association, a guild, BIA, or even something less formal. Either way, community support can go a long way to making your business more resilient. But it isn't just a one-way street between community and business. Communities can also thrive when businesses invest in them. Take Regina's warehouse district, for example. It wouldn't be the vibrant community it is today without businesses like Bushwackers and Basket Cases investing in their success. Bev and Elaine Robertson have left a true legacy in Regina, not only of craft beer, but more importantly, community. Yes, We Are Open is a Menares podcast production. I'd like to thank Grant for taking the time to share his story. You can learn more about Bushwakker Brewpub at bushwakker.com. That's Bushwakker with 2 Ks. Follow them on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. For more information about this podcast, visit our site, yesweareopenpodcast.com. If you're a Canadian small business owner or know one with an interesting story of perseverance to tell, I'd love to help tell it. You can contact me at podcast@menares.com. Tune in next week for another story of small business struggle and survival on the Yes We Are Open podcast. I'm Al Grego. Thank you for listening.